No one in the medical bay noticed when the human opened his eyes. That alone should have warned them. The warship Astra Valorum drifted silently at the edge of the shattered moon, its hull scarred from plasma fire, its corridors filled with the low hum of emergency systems. Inside the central medical bay, wounded beings from 6 different species lay side by side. Some moaned softly. Others lay perfectly still, wrapped in glowing medical fields. On one narrow recovery platform lay a human. His name was Elias Rowan, and according to the ship's records, he should not have been alive. Consciousness returned to Elias slowly, like light breaking through deep water. Pain followed immediately, sharp, layered, everywhere. His chest felt crushed. His legs burned. His left side screamed with every shallow breath. He did not cry out. Instead, his eyes opened just enough to observe. The ceiling above him curved like liquid metal, glowing with soft teal light. Alien symbols scrolled silently along the edges, medical diagnostics meant for non-human eyes. The air smelled clean, almost sweet, nothing like the ash and blood of the battlefield he remembered. So I survived, he thought. Barely. A soft voice drifted nearby, musical but precise. Stabilize the Karen patient. Increase neural dampening by 12%. Elias turned his head slightly. The movement sent lightning through his spine, but he controlled his breath, forcing his body to remain still. An alien nurse stood beside the adjacent platform. She was tall and slender, her skin a pale silver blue that shimmered faintly under the lights. 4 delicate fingers moved expertly across a hovering medical console. Her eyes, large and amber, reflected layers of data only she could see. She had not noticed him yet. Good. Elias scanned the room with slow, deliberate eye movements. 12 patients visible. 2 critical. 1 dead, already covered with a thin white shroud. He catalogued everything automatically. Exits. Guards. Tools. Training never slept. A sharp intake of breath reached his ears. The alien nurse hissed softly, pulling her hand back from the patient she was treating. A thin line of dark fluid, her blood, ran along her forearm. Careless, she muttered, reaching for a sterilization field. Elias watched the wound. It was small, but deep. A jagged shard of alloy had sliced her skin when the ship took its last hit. The bleeding had slowed, but the edges were already inflamed. Infection risk. She ignored it. Elias frowned. Against his better judgment, he spoke. Your arm. The nurse startled so badly she nearly dropped her scanner. She spun toward him, eyes wide. You're awake. Yes, Elias said calmly. And you're injured. Her gaze flicked to his medical display. You should not be conscious. Your trauma index. Can wait, he interrupted gently. Sit down. There was something in his voice. Not loud. Not aggressive. Certain. The nurse hesitated. Alien medical training emphasized authority, hierarchy, protocol. Human patients rarely challenged it, especially not ones barely holding themselves together. But something about the human's tone made her pause. My name is Sereth Valcorin, she said cautiously. Senior medical specialist of the Aurelian Concord. And you are in no condition to. Elias, he said. Please. Sit. Slowly, against her own expectations, Sereth found herself lowering into the nearby chair. Elias pushed himself upright. Pain exploded through him. His vision blurred. His hands trembled for half a second before steadying. Sereth watched, stunned, as the human swung his legs over the edge of the platform and stood. You should be restrained, she said. Your injuries. I've stood up worse, Elias replied. He moved toward the supply station with careful steps, one hand braced against a console. Every motion was deliberate, efficient. No wasted energy. No panic. He retrieved a sterilizer, antiseptic gel, and a flexible seal bandage. Sereth stared. You have medical training. Enough. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself slowly to avoid collapsing. When he reached for her arm, his touch was light, almost reverent. She flinched. "Relax," he said quietly. "I won't hurt you." That was when she noticed his hands. Scarred, burned, calloused. Hands that had held weapons. Yet they moved as gently as flowing water. Elias cleaned the wound with precise motions, removing microscopic debris, adjusting pressure to avoid further tearing. He worked in silence, fully focused. Sereth felt her breath slow. No human soldier had ever touched her like this. Most were impatient, driven, focused on returning to battle. This one treated her arm as if it were fragile glass. "You're being careful," she said. "That's the point." He sealed the wound properly, adjusting the bandage to allow circulation while preventing strain. When he finished, he leaned back slightly, exhaling through clenched teeth. "There," he said. "That should heal cleanly." Sereth flexed her fingers. The pain was already fading. She looked at him, confusion rippling through her features. Why would a frontline human know this level of care? Elias met her eyes. Something unreadable passed between them. "Because," he said softly, "soldiers don't just learn how to break things." Sereth studied him more closely now. Not as a patient. Not as a liability. As a mystery. Her scanner chirped suddenly. She glanced at it, then froze. "You're not a civilian," she said slowly. Elias said nothing. Her eyes widened as she read deeper. "Your neural markers, combat conditioning, classified augment signatures." She looked up at him. "You're military." "Yes." "But this level of restraint, this gentleness." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That's too gentle for a soldier." Elias smiled faintly, exhaustion finally pulling at his posture. "Who told you soldiers can't choose how they touch the world?" The medical bay felt quieter after that. As if the ship itself was listening. And somewhere deep within Sereth Valkorin, something she had believed all her life began to fracture. Sereth tried to return to her work. She truly did. But every time she lifted a scanner, her eyes drifted back to the human on the recovery platform, Elias Rowan, sitting upright like he belonged there, like the pain and the bandages were only minor inconveniences. He should have been sleeping. He should have been sedated. Instead, he watched the medical bay with the quiet patience of someone who had survived too many disasters to waste energy on surprise. Sereth had treated hundreds of wounded soldiers across multiple species. Warriors from the Karen swarm. Razor-backed mercenaries from the Vost. Plasma-lanced commandos from the Dravari Republic. They all had the same look. Hungry. Hard. Restless. But Elias? He looked tired in a different way. Not defeated. Just alert. Like his mind refused to fully rest, even when his body begged for it. A soft alarm chimed. Sereth turned sharply. A patient's vitals were dipping, an Aurelian Marine, one of her own species. His breathing grew shallow, the stabilizing field flickering. She moved instantly, calling out instructions to 2 junior medics. They rushed to assist. Sereth adjusted the neural dampening, then triggered a pulse stabilizer. The Marine's readings steadied, barely. She exhaled. Then she saw Elias stand again. It was absurd. He moved toward the platform where the Aurelian Marine lay, careful but steady, one hand pressed against his ribs as if keeping them from exploding. "Stop," Sereth snapped. "You will tear internal tissue." Elias did not stop. He did slow, just enough to show he heard her. "I'm not doing anything reckless," he said. "That sentence is not yours to decide," Sereth replied, voice tight. "This is a medical bay. You are a patient." Elias reached the Marine's platform and looked down at him. The Marine's skin was ashen, eyes darting beneath half-closed lids, trapped in fever dreams. Elias watched the trembling hands, the rigid jaw. Then he spoke softly. "He's reliving it." Sereth frowned. "Reliving what?" "The breach," Elias said, voice low. "The boarding fight. The airlock screams." Sereth's fingers paused over the console. "That is impossible. He is sedated." Elias shook his head once. "Body's sedated. Mind isn't." Sereth stared at him. This was not medical theory from any Aurelian textbook. This was something learned the hard way. Elias leaned closer to the Marine and placed 2 fingers gently on the side of his neck, near a nerve cluster. Sereth stepped forward. "Do not touch him." Elias pressed lightly. The Marine's breathing changed almost instantly. The twitching eased. His jaw unclenched. His heartbeat, previously jagged, began to level. Sereth froze. Elias removed his hand carefully. He needed grounding. Sereth's voice came out quieter than she intended. "Where did you learn that?" Elias didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the sleeping Marine, watching to ensure he stayed stable. Then he said, "War teaches you what textbooks don't." Sereth swallowed, unsettled. She could have demanded his file. She could have called security. She could have ordered restraints. But the Marine's vitals were stable now. And Sereth could not ignore the truth. The human had helped. She glanced at his bandages. "You're bleeding through." Elias looked down and noticed it like a minor detail. "Yeah." "You are not, yeah. You are injured." Elias gave a faint smile. "So are you. And you didn't stop working." Sereth opened her mouth, then shut it. Because he was right. And that made her angry. Not at him. At herself. At the fact that she had been doing the same thing, pushing, forcing, refusing rest, because guilt whispered that every moment spent resting was a betrayal of the dead. Sereth turned away abruptly and returned to her console. "Go back to your platform." Elias didn't argue. He walked back, slower this time, and sat down carefully. Sereth told herself she was relieved. But her mind kept circling the same question. What kind of soldier stays gentle? A new sound cut through the bay. Not an alarm. A voice. Cold. Commanding. Senior Medical Specialist Sereth Valkorin. Sereth stiffened. She recognized the tone instantly. Military authority. She turned and saw a figure stepping through the bay's main doors. The newcomer was Aurelian, like her, but built differently, taller, broader, armored in black plating with silver trim. His rank crest shimmered on his chest. Behind him, 2 security units carried shock staves. His amber eyes swept the room, then locked onto Elias. Sereth's heart tightened. The officer's name flashed in her memory like a warning. Commander Wraithkern. He was not known for mercy. He was known for results. Wraith approached Sereth first. "Report." Sereth kept her posture controlled. Medical bay status stable. Casualties contained. Patients recovering. Wraith's gaze flicked toward Elias again. "And the human?" Sereth hesitated. "Alive." Wraith stepped closer. "That's not what I asked." Sereth's throat tightened. "He is conscious." Wraith's lips tightened into a thin line. "Of course he is." Sereth's spine chilled. There was something in Wraith's voice, something that suggested he knew more than he should. Wraith moved past her toward Elias. Elias did not move. He did not tense. He simply watched the commander approach, calm as stone. Wraith stopped at the edge of Elias's platform and stared down at him like he was assessing a weapon. "Elias Rowan," Wraith said. Elias didn't respond. Wraith continued anyway. "Human Special Operations. Call sign, Quiet Mercy." Sereth's eyes widened slightly. Quiet Mercy? That sounded like propaganda. Or a myth. Wraith leaned in. "You were not supposed to survive the breach on Station Vera." Elias finally spoke, voice even. "And yet here I am." Wraith's gaze sharpened. "Tell me why." Elias's expression didn't change. "I didn't feel like dying." Wraith's jaw tightened. He glanced at Sereth. "Leave." Sereth blinked. "Commander, this is my..." "Leave," Wraith repeated, colder. Sereth's fingers curled into a tight fist. But she stepped back, because refusing a commander in front of armed security was not bravery. It was suicide. She retreated to the far side of the bay, but she did not go far. She watched. Elias remained still. Wraith lowered his voice. You disarmed a Karen plasma nest with a medical kit. Elias said nothing. Wraith continued, as if reading a list. You surrendered yourself to save civilians. You negotiated a ceasefire with an enemy species that does not speak. Elias's eyes flickered. That one took effort. Wraith's face hardened. And then you vanished. Sereth stared. Vanished? Wraith leaned closer. We have been searching for you. Elias's voice was calm, but something sharp lived underneath it. I didn't run from you. I ran from what you wanted me to become. Wraith straightened slowly. The security units behind him shifted their staves. Sereth felt her pulse rise. Wraith's voice grew dangerously soft. You are a soldier. You don't get to choose what you become. Elias looked up at him. And Sereth saw it. Not anger. Not fear. A quiet, terrifying certainty. You're wrong, Elias said. That's the only thing we ever choose. The air felt thinner. Wraith's eyes narrowed. You are needed. For what? Elias asked. Another massacre dressed up as strategy. Wraith's jaw clenched. Don't pretend you don't know, Elias continued. You brought me here because you think gentleness is a weakness you can weaponize. Sereth's breath caught. Because that was exactly what it sounded like. Wraith took a slow breath, then turned slightly, glancing at the two security units. Restrain him. Sereth took a step forward without thinking. Commander, he's injured. Wraith didn't look at her. He's dangerous. Elias lifted his hands slowly. Not in surrender. In permission. The security units moved in. Shock staves raised. Sereth's mind screamed at her to stop them. But her body froze. Because she had seen what humans did when cornered. Then Elias spoke, softly. Sereth. Her name. From his mouth, it sounded like a reminder. Like an anchor. She met his eyes. And in that moment, she understood something horrifying. Elias wasn't afraid of the shock staves. He was afraid of what he might do if forced. He didn't want to hurt them. He didn't want to become the monster Wraith expected. That was why he stayed gentle. Not because he couldn't be brutal. Because he could. Sereth swallowed. And then she moved. She stepped between Elias and the security units. Wraith's eyes snapped to her. What are you doing? Sereth's voice shook, but she held her ground. This is a medical bay, she said. And he is under my care. Wraith stared at her like she'd gone insane. Elias said nothing. But Sereth felt something behind her, like warmth. Like trust. Wraith's expression turned icy. Move. Sereth's hands trembled at her sides. Yet she stayed. Because she had seen the human's hands. Scarred hands. Gentle hands. Hands that chose not to destroy. And suddenly, Sereth realized she wanted the galaxy to have more people like that. Not fewer. Wraith's voice dropped. If you protect him, you defy the Concord. Sereth whispered, then maybe the Concord needs to be defied. The silence that followed was deadly. Then Wraith smiled. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone who had just found the exact pressure point to break a person. Very well, he said. Keep him. Sereth's stomach tightened. What? Wraith stepped back. Let him recover. He turned to leave. Then he stopped at the doorway and looked over his shoulder. But understand this, senior specialist. Wraith's eyes locked onto Elias. If the human chooses gentleness, we will make sure the galaxy punishes him for it. And then he was gone. Sereth stood still for a moment, heart pounding. Slowly, she turned back toward Elias. Elias looked exhausted, eyes heavy, but his voice was calm. That was the first warning, he said quietly. Sereth swallowed. First. Elias nodded. They won't stop. He leaned back against the platform, wincing as pain struck again. "But we can," he added. Sereth stared at him, fear and curiosity twisting together. "How?" Elias's eyes held hers. "With what humans do best," he said. "We outthink the predators." The medical bay never truly slept. Lights dimmed and brightened in slow cycles. Machines hummed softly. Wounded bodies shifted, dreamed, breathed. But after Commander Wraithkern left, the air itself felt alert, as if the ship had learned to listen for danger. Sereth stood frozen for several long seconds. Then her knees weakened. She lowered herself into the nearest chair, fingers gripping its edge as if the floor might vanish beneath her. She had defied a Concord commander. That truth hit harder than any plasma shock. Across the bay, Elias lay back against his platform, eyes half closed, chest rising unevenly. Only now did Sereth notice how pale he had become, how tightly his jaw was clenched. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. Sereth laughed once, breathless and sharp. "That is not helpful." Elias opened his eyes fully and looked at her. "You just put a target on yourself." Sereth met his gaze. "You already had one." It simply widened. Silence stretched between them. Then Elias nodded slowly. "Fair." Sereth stood and walked back to him, her professional instincts finally reasserting themselves. She checked his vitals, frowned at the readings, and adjusted his stabilizers with firm efficiency. "You pushed yourself too far," she said. "Again." "I warned you," Elias replied weakly. "I'm bad at resting." She snorted despite herself. "I noticed." As she worked, her thoughts churned. Quiet mercy. A call sign was not given lightly, especially not one so contradictory. Concord intelligence used names that reduced beings to functions. Weapons. Assets. Tools. Quiet mercy sounded like a story. Or a warning. "Commander Wraith knew you," Sereth said after a moment. "Not personally. But enough." Elias didn't answer. Sereth pressed. "What did you do?" Elias's gaze drifted toward the ceiling. "I stopped a war." Sereth paused. "That is not something one soldier does." Elias's lips curved faintly. "That's what they said too." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, as if choosing how much to share. "3 cycles ago," he began, "humans were losing a border conflict against the Velrics combine. They had numbers. Tech. No interest in negotiation." Sereth nodded. She knew the records. Everyone did. "High Command wanted a final strike," Elias continued. "Something decisive. Something ugly." Sereth's hands stilled. "And you?" "I was sent in first," Elias said. "To prepare the ground." Sereth swallowed. Preparation usually means weakening defenses. "Usually," Elias agreed. He turned his head to look at her. "Instead, I walked into their capital unarmed." Sereth's breath caught. "That's suicide." "Yes." "So why did you survive?" Elias's voice was calm, but there was weight behind every word. "Because I didn't threaten them. I listened." Sereth frowned. "The Velrics do not respond to empathy. They respond to patterns," Elias said. "And their pattern was fear. Fear of extinction. Fear of humans doing what every other empire had done to them." Sereth's mind raced. "You convinced them not to fight," she said slowly. "I convinced them that if they won," Elias replied, "they'd lose everything that made survival worth it." Sereth stared at him. "And High Command?" Elias's expression hardened slightly. "They didn't like it." "Because you denied them victory," Sereth said. "Because I denied them control," Elias corrected. Sereth understood then. The Concord didn't fear Elias because he was violent. They feared him because he proved violence wasn't always necessary. That made him uncontrollable. A chime sounded softly. Sereth turned to see one of the junior medics glance nervously toward the bay entrance. "Senior Specialist, security patrols have increased." Elias exhaled. They're tightening the net. Sereth straightened. Then we adapt. Elias raised an eyebrow. You're serious? I placed myself between you and armed units, Sereth said. That was not hesitation. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. If the Concord wants you broken, then I want to know why. Elias studied her for a long moment. Then he said, because the next phase of this war doesn't end with fleets. Sereth's chest tightened. Then how does it end? With choices, Elias said. And with someone refusing to follow orders. Before Sereth could respond, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the bay went dark. Emergency illumination snapped on, bathing everything in deep red. Alarms began to wail. Sereth's training kicked in instantly. All hands, emergency protocol. The ship shuddered violently. A distant explosion echoed through the hull. Elias grabbed the edge of the platform, forcing himself upright despite the pain. That wasn't external fire, he said. Sereth looked at him sharply. How do you know? Because it was too precise. Another impact hit. Then another. The alarms changed tone. Boarding alert. Sereth's blood ran cold. Internal breach, one of the medics shouted. Multiple hostile signatures. Elias swung his legs over the platform again. Sereth grabbed his arm. No. He looked at her. They're not here for the ship. Her grip tightened. They are here for you. Yes, Elias agreed. And anyone who helps me. Sereth released him slowly. What do you need? She asked. Elias blinked, surprised. Then he smiled, not wide, not proud, but real. Access, he said. And trust. Sereth turned without hesitation and moved to the central console. Her fingers flew across the controls, overriding standard protocols. What are you doing? A medic asked in panic. Saving lives, Sereth replied. The bay doors sealed. Internal sensors rerouted. Security cameras looped. Elias watched, impressed. You're good, he said. Sereth didn't look back. You're not the only one who can choose gentleness. A thunderous impact shook the bay doors. Metal groaned. Elias took a slow breath. This is where they expect me to become what they fear, he said quietly. Sereth turned to him. And will you? Elias shook his head. No. The doors buckled. Cracks spread. Elias met her eyes one last time before stepping forward. I'll end this without killing them. Sereth felt a chill. That may be harder. Elias nodded. That's why they never taught it. The doors exploded inward. Smoke filled the bay. Armored figures poured through, Concord enforcement troops, weapons raised, visors glowing red. Elias stepped into the open. Unarmed. Hands visible. Calm. Every instinct screamed at Sereth that this was madness. But she watched the soldiers hesitate. Just for a second. Because the human in front of them did not look like a threat. And that hesitation, that tiny fracture, was all Elias needed. The first Concord soldier through the shattered doors froze. His rifle was raised. His visor locked onto Elias's chest. Targeting reticles bloomed red. But the trigger did not pull. Elias stood still in the center of the smoke-filled medical bay, hands open, posture relaxed, eyes steady. He did not shout. He did not plead. He did not threaten. He waited. That alone broke protocol. Stand down, the squad leader barked through external speakers. Human, get on the floor. Elias tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words. No, he said calmly. The word echoed through the bay, simple and unarmed. Behind him, Sereth felt her heart slam against her ribs. Every tactical simulation she had ever studied screamed that this was where people died. But Elias did not die. Instead, he took one slow step forward. The soldiers tensed. Elias stopped. You've been told I'm dangerous, he said evenly. You're right. Several fingers tightened on triggers. Not because I fight, Elias continued, but because I make you hesitate. The squad leader snarled, "Fire!" No one fired. The hesitation spread like a crack in glass. Elias spoke again, voice carrying without effort. "Check your orders. Read them again. Word for word." The squad leader stiffened. Because Elias was right. Concord enforcement doctrine was absolute, but precise. Every use of lethal force required confirmation of hostile intent. And Elias was standing unarmed in a medical bay, protecting wounded patients. One soldier shifted uneasily. Another glanced toward a patient bed where an injured Aurelian child whimpered softly, frightened by the noise. Elias followed the glance. "You came here to restore order," he said. "So did I." The squad leader stepped forward. "You are a classified destabilizing element." Elias nodded once. "That's the kindest thing the Concords ever called me." Seraph watched something extraordinary happen. The soldiers were not seeing a target anymore. They were seeing themselves. Their breathing slowed. Their stances loosened. The perfect symmetry of trained violence began to unravel. Elias lowered his voice. "If you fire, you'll be obeying orders." He took another step forward. "If you don't," he said, "you'll be choosing." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, one rifle lowered. Then another. The squad leader's visor flickered as internal command signals flooded in. Commander Rather's voice cut through their comms, sharp, furious, demanding action. Elias didn't hear it. But he saw the effect. He moved closer to the squad leader until only a few steps separated them. "You know why the Concord fears me," Elias said quietly. "Because once you realize you can choose, orders stop being chains." The squad leader's hand trembled. Then he did something no Concord soldier had done in centuries. He turned off his weapon. The sound was soft. Final. Rather's voice erupted through the speakers. "This is insubordination." Elias looked toward the ceiling. "No," he said. "This is evolution." Security troops across the bay followed the example. Weapons powered down. Visors lifted. Fear replaced by something unfamiliar. Relief. Seratha's knees nearly gave out. The boarding force stood down. Without a single shot fired. Moments later, Concord command signals went silent. Wraith had cut the feed. Retreated. Elias exhaled slowly, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. The effort caught up with him all at once. His legs weakened. Serath was there instantly, catching him before he fell. "You did it," she whispered. Elias shook his head faintly. "No." He looked at the soldiers, now unsure, human and alien alike, standing in the wrecked doorway. They did. Medical alarms chimed urgently. Elias's vitals spiked dangerously. Serath eased him back onto the platform, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You're crashing," she said. "And this time, you don't get to argue." Elias managed a weak smile. "Worth it." As he slipped into unconsciousness, the medical bay felt different. Not safe. But changed. Word spread fast. Across decks. Across species. Across encrypted channels the Concord could not fully silence. A human had stopped an enforcement unit without violence. A medical bay had become a battlefield, and mercy had won. Serath stood beside Elias's platform long after the crisis ended, watching his chest rise and fall. She knew this wasn't over. The Concord would respond. Harder. Smarter. But something irreversible had happened. People had seen another way. And once seen, it could not be unseen. Somewhere far beyond the ship, messages were already spreading. Stories. Whispers. Dangerous ideas. That maybe, strength didn't always look like domination. Maybe the most terrifying thing in the galaxy was a human who refused to become what the war demanded. Elias Rowan did not wake up to alarms. He woke up to silence. Not the uneasy quiet of a ship between battles, but something deeper. Intentional. Like a held breath. His eyes opened slowly. The medical bay was empty. No medics rushing. No soldiers standing guard. No machines screaming warnings. Only soft light and the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat echoed in the monitors beside him. For a moment, he wondered if he was dead. Then he felt pain. Sharp. Heavy. Real. So, still alive. Good. He turned his head and saw Sereth standing near the far wall, hands folded behind her back, posture rigid. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching the sealed bay doors like she expected them to burst open at any second. How long? Elias asked quietly. Sereth startled, then turned. Relief flashed across her face before discipline smothered it. 30 hours, she said. You nearly didn't make it. Elias exhaled. Figures. She crossed the bay and checked his vitals with quick, practiced motions. Your internal damage worsened after the confrontation. Neural overload. Cardiac strain. Your body finally reminded you that you are not indestructible. Elias smiled faintly. It's very rude like that. Sereth did not smile back. They're coming, she said. Elias's expression sobered. Right. Yes. And not just him. She hesitated, then continued. The Concord Council issued a joint directive. You are no longer classified as a destabilizing element. Elias raised an eyebrow. That sounds promising. Sereth met his eyes. You are now classified as a contagion. That landed harder than any weapon. Elias absorbed it in silence. A thought spreader, Sereth continued. A systemic threat. Proof that obedience can fail. Elias closed his eyes briefly. They always hated ideas more than bombs. Sereth nodded. They are mobilizing fleets. Not to destroy Earth. Elias opened his eyes sharply. Then where? To isolate humanity, she said. Cut trade. Cut travel. Cut communication. Make your species a warning. Elias lay still, the weight of that settling in. All this, because he refused to pull a trigger. People will suffer, he said quietly. Yes, Sereth replied. But the council underestimated something. Elias looked at her. So did I, she admitted. She activated a hollow projection. Across the bay, images flared to life. Footage from the medical bay confrontation. From multiple angles. Security feeds. Personal recorders. Civilian implants. Elias standing unarmed. Weapons lowering. Soldiers choosing. The footage leaked, Sereth said. Not by humans. Elias stared. Then who? Everyone else. The images shifted. A Karen commander watching in silence. A Velrix diplomat replaying the moment Elias stepped forward. A Dravari officer pausing mid-briefing as the soundless footage played behind him. They saw it, Sereth said. And they understood. Elias's voice was hoarse. Understood what? That humanity is dangerous, Sereth said softly. Elias almost laughed. That's not new. No, she corrected. Dangerous because you remind us we can choose. She looked at him with something close to awe. You didn't just stop soldiers, she said. You exposed the Concord's greatest weakness. Elias waited. They rule by convincing everyone that brutality is inevitable, Sereth finished. You proved it's optional. The bay lights dimmed suddenly. Then steadied. Sereth stiffened. They are here. Elias pushed himself up on his elbows, ignoring the pain. How much time? Minutes, she said. They want you alive. Elias nodded. Of course they do. Sereth hesitated. Then she did something that would have ended her career forever. She removed her rank insignia and set it on the platform beside him. I'm coming with you, she said. Elias stared at her. They'll hunt you. They already are, she replied. For hesitating. He studied her face, searching for doubt. There was none. Why? he asked. Sereth answered without hesitation. Because if the galaxy is changing, I want to be on the side that heals it. Footsteps thundered outside the bay. Orders shouted. Elias swung his legs over the side of the platform, standing slowly, painfully. You don't have to do this, he said. Sereth stepped beside him. Neither did you. The doors began to unlock. Elias took a breath. He wasn't afraid. That surprised him. All his life, fear had been a tool. Something to manage. Something to survive. Now, it was quiet. The doors slid open. Commander Wraith Kern stood there, flanked by armed units and council observers projected as shimmering figures of light. Wraith's eyes locked onto Elias. You will come with us, Wraith said. Peacefully. Elias nodded. I already did. Wraith frowned. What? Elias looked past him, to the soldiers, the observers, the watching galaxy. I came peacefully when I chose not to fight, Elias said. What happens next is your choice. Wraith snarled. You think this changes anything? Elias met his gaze. It already has. Wraith hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. And that hesitation rippled outward. Elias turned and walked forward. No restraints. No resistance. Sereth walked beside him. As they passed through the corridor, beings of dozens of species watched in silence. Not with hatred. Not with fear. But with something far more dangerous. Hope. Later, much later, the Concord would fracture. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But cracks would spread. Humans would be isolated. Yes. But they would not be alone. Because across the stars, others would remember the human who stood unarmed in a medical bay and refused to become a monster. And they would ask themselves the same question. If he could choose gentleness in war, why couldn't they? The galaxy would never be the same. Not because humanity conquered it, but because humanity reminded it how to choose.